Reclaiming Wellness. It's a mental health spotlight series. This is number 3. Tonight, we're understanding trauma and supporting survivors. Dr. Moore is a criminologist, an associate professor, an author, and associate director of the Trauma Recovery Center at Alameda County Family Justice Center. With over a decade of experience in law enforcement and community corrections, she now leads a clinical team supporting survivors of domestic violence, human trafficking, sexual assault. Dr. Moore also hosts Want More with Dr. Moore, the criminologist of the Bay, a podcast exploring the realities of the justice system. Rafiki Coalition, help me bring Dr. Moore up to the podium.
Hello, everybody. How y'all doing today? Ooh, it's a beautiful crowd today. Well, like my wonderful introduction, I was like, who is that girl when she was introducing her? Thank you for having me, and this is a real honor to be here to share about trauma. I think sometimes when we talk about it, we often don't realize how it impacts our communities and this collective shared experience of trauma. So I'm going to talk about that today. All right, so this is the agenda. I am a college professor, so I always do one of these. Excuse me. It keeps me on point on what we're talking about, and then also for you to know what today and what to expect. So we'll go over some learning objectives. I have a discussion question for you all, because this is class. We're going to learn today, right? I'm going to go into the definition of trauma, and we'll have some conversation around that. We'll look at the concept of collective trauma and also trauma-informed practice. And I put it practice because it's not just in the workspace, but it's in every space that we occupy. We'll have a little bit of time for questions and answers. We'll wrap up, and that'll be the conclusion of today. All right. All right. So learning objectives. Really just kind of 3 key points I hope to hone in by the end of today. Increase awareness of the psychological and behavioral impact of trauma. Recognize the impact of collective trauma from a multicultural perspective, and introduce the 6 core principles of trauma-informed practice and provide examples of how to apply them. Oh, it sounds so wordsy, don't it? Oh, but we do this almost every day in our everyday lives. So this is just putting some words to actions that we're already taking, okay? All right, so question to you all. How would you define trauma? Hurt, crisis.
Something that stunts your emotional growth.
Something that stunts your emotional growth. I like it. I heard behavior. Anything else from the audience? Where did I hear that from? Pain. Ooh, okay. Tragic? Yeah. Yeah. We know what trauma is, huh? We've seen it, experienced it, heard about it, read about it, felt it, and dealt with it ourselves. Yeah. And so when you look at trauma, and again, these are this is just a definition inclusive of pretty much everything that was shared in here. Trauma is an emotional response to a deeply distressing or disturbing event that overwhelms an individual's ability to cope, right? Because we've all had stuff, the bad days and stuff hit the fan, but this means that it's now halted your ability to really function optimally. This can include abuse, neglect, displacement, and other adverse experiences. So this is not just a one-time type of incident, or it can be multi-layered. So I want to talk about the different types of trauma and how it hits us, right? So we have acute trauma. That's that one-time trauma. Most of the people that I have interacted with in life, work and professional, acute trauma is not it. If it was just a one-time ordeal, that's a little bit easier to process. But many people, especially many people in communities like this, the melanin-rich communities, I like to call it, right? Our trauma is not just a one-off incident, right? So we have chronic trauma, which is ongoing exposure to something. And this could be environmental, this could be health, right? This could be emotional, this could be financial. This could be all of the above. And then this last one here, which is something that I am seeing a lot at our Trauma Recovery Center, and I'm sure that is existing in greater abundance in different places, is complex trauma. So this is multiple or prolonged traumatic events. So this means that you may have a trauma in 2005, another one in 2006, something else happens in 2012, or, right? We all know what happened in 2020, right? So when we think about these levels of trauma, right, we are all existing in them in some way, fashion, or form. And oftentimes people in our communities and in our circles are also experiencing these levels of trauma. And if you work with people, and I'm not saying just professionally, but I'm saying, like, I'm speaking about my kinfolk, right? And the people that you may call friends or loved ones, and also people, if you have clients or if you're working in a helping capacity, they are often coming with you or coming to you with these complex forms of trauma. And so we want to be aware of what that looks like, right? We want to know, be aware about the impacts of it, but we also want to be able to kind of call it as it's happening as well. That helps our ability to work with them. It helps their ability to have this process take part. All right, so traumatic events. So I'm going to talk about this concept, adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. Has anybody ever heard of ACEs? All right, throw them hands up. All right, yeah. It's interesting because this concept was actually developed here in this community. We know about it, right? Okay, yeah. So when we are talking about this, this is not like a foreign concept that happened way over yonder, right? This happened right on 3rd, where this was conceptualized. So ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. Adverse childhood experiences. So we're talking about some traumatic events that may have transpired for somebody before the age or by the age of 17. Before they've reached the legal age of maturation, right? And I mean, just kind of think about people who have experienced those. You may have been one of those people who may have experienced a trauma before the age of 18 years of age. So traumatic events that occur between birth to 17 years old and can have long-lasting negative effects on health and well-being. So something that happened to you at 7 can still have impacts to you at 37, 47. That's what ACEs is, right? These experiences include things like abuse, neglect, exposure to violence, or household dysfunction, just to name a few, right? ACEs are linked not just to deficits in our emotional well-being, but also impacts our health as well. Right? When people say, you know, certain communities have all of these health issues, well, what does it start from? And a lot of these health issues have been linked to ACEs, right? So ACEs are linked to increased risk of chronic health problems, mental health issues, and substance misuse in adulthood. So again, something that you did or something that was exposed to you, that was done to you at a young age, and how it has long-lasting impacts to you. That's kind of scary, ain't it? I mean, because before the age of 18, we don't all really have control of our own destiny, right? I don't know about y'all, but I was being taken care of, even though I thought I was an adult. I wasn't, right? And so being in a situation where you really don't have control of it, and that incident can have an impact on the rest of your life. That's concerning, right? And so again, for us who are working with people, dealing with people, interacting with people, we may be those people who are dealing with these traumas. It's good for us to be aware of what it looks like, how it manifests, and even some ways to respond to it positively. All right, so now we know what ACEs are, right? And I'm not talking about spades and bid whist and all of that, all right? Quiz at the end. Okay. All right, so now I want to kind of shift, now that we know and have a understanding, definitely a working understanding of trauma just from the room, right, kind of translating that into what is called collective trauma. Now, collective trauma, psychological distress experienced by a group of people due to a shared crisis. Yeah, it's interesting, right? We can all point to the pandemic and say that that was a collective trauma. But in our own communities, we are exposed to traumas. And if they, even though they don't make it necessarily to the news or to the big screen or to a documentary coming to you soon, right, it doesn't mean that these traumas are not a shared collective experience by many people. These events may impact a person's emotional well-being, cognitive functioning, and ability to focus. So that's just a couple of them, right? But your overall well-being, the way that your mind thinks, right, and your ability to focus on stuff. Wow.
Like the people also that deal with natural disasters, the victims of natural disasters, the fires,
What?
tornadoes.
You must have knew what my next slide was gonna be. Oh, okay, A in the front row, I see it, yeah. But that's exactly what it is, right? So just to give some examples, natural disasters, earthquakes, hurricanes, wildfires, right? All of those things, they can happen right here in this place today, right? And they have definitely happened in California very recently. So I kind of want to bring your attention to two events that you probably are familiar with, one in California, one across the country, but nonetheless, the demographic impacted is pretty much the same, right? So we look at Hurricane Katrina. Y'all remember Hurricane Katrina? Oh my goodness, people have family members coming out here, going here. You may have lost people, people were displaced, right? That was a real collective trauma. And even though our vantage point may have been across the country watching it on the news, we still were impacted by it, right? And so even though it wasn't our individual trauma, it was vicariously traumatizing to us. And that was a shared collective experience as well. So our Hurricane Katrina victims, right? Many of them were displaced minorities. Is that a surprise? All right. You know, I found it very interesting when they were referred to as refugees. When before the dam broke, they was tax-paying citizens, right, with those types of expectations. But now, when we shift the perspective a little bit, they're not even considered Americans anymore, right? And just kind of think, what does that look like, especially from a group of people largely represented in that group who had to deal with the ancestral history of slavery, right? We had to deal with the Jim Crow era, right? And so to kind of think like, and now in the 2000s, people have reverted back to being called refugees? Wow, that's traumatizing. I was impacted by that. I was like, refugees? No, that must not be the word. No, but that was the word. That was the word, right? Another, already existing in lower socioeconomic conditions, and then on top of that, to lose everything. But that wasn't the story that we received, right? We saw the snippets of the people who were still in TVs, and that became the narrative, right? But that's also a trauma response as well, right? But instead of giving it the recognition in that light, it looks as if people are just stealing to steal. Yeah. So again, another collective shared trauma. Yeah. Yes.
To lose everything should be bold because that's a huge trauma. When you collected all these things, memorabilia, family pictures, all of that, and you lose it in a matter of hours, is really, really taxing and traumatizing on your mental state.
It is.
Right. That should be bold. Because I had a kid that I worked with in school. He came from Katrina to the classroom, and you could tell he was in trauma because he just, the family that brought him here, he wasn't the cleanliness. He still needs to know. He missed his mom. He moved out here with his aunt, and he was just, really displaced. He didn't know what to make it. Trying to find new friends,
And I like that point, really displaced. That was very powerful to kind of articulate that. And coming to age, you got all your stuff. You know how important stuff is at 15 and 16. That's all you got is your stuff, right? And your family name. And then to have all that literally just washed away. And then to be displaced across the country area, this is a totally different culture that we exist in. And we expect you to get with it. Hey, pay attention in class. Why are you not sitting up? Huh? He just lost everything. and got a new zip code and address and don't know where he's at. Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, our family was from New Orleans, and it wasn't just the loss of the material things, it was the church community, all the people who for generations had lived together in that area of New Orleans, and that breakdown, of the social support, the emotional support. A lot of our elders didn't make it because it was just more than they could handle. So as you're talking about it, part of me is like being re-triggered and going, oh my God, but thank you for bringing it up because it is a prime example of collective trauma. So thank you.
And thank you for sharing that, right? I was just talking about the things and the individual's experience shared amongst other people, but now we're talking about a community experience, right? You've lost the church. I don't know how long your church has been around, but my church has been around longer than I can even think, right? So all the records, all the experiences, all the gatherings, right? Where we gonna have, the repast at, and all of those types of things that we take for granted or took for granted until it was no longer available. Yeah. Collective trauma, right? And even, and I like that you said that, or shared that you still feel it, because in you sharing that, I felt it too. And I don't know if y'all felt that too, right? So even years later, we still are triggered by these remnants of this collective trauma that was experienced. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you. I'll be quick. Not from New Orleans, but had a family that I got really close to, and they were from New Orleans. And they still live in New Orleans. But I just kind of asked, what happened? What are your experiences? I know what we see on TV, but what was it like? I could imagine, but I really could not imagine. And one of the things that they said is, like you said, the church and people were displaced. Everybody was put all over the place, and they didn't know where each other were. But when they did find shelter for them, they had trailer homes, and they just had them all lined up, and they said there was rats and roaches and all kind of bugs just roaming all over the place. It was very, very cold. There was, it was shelter, but it was not real good shelter. And so they really just didn't have any place to go. And then you get displaced all over the place. And a lot of people just never came back, and they couldn't get their homes back. And they wanted to use that place to build up and regentrification to move us out, but not allow us to come back in.
That's not just a New Orleans issue or a Louisiana thing, right? Yeah. And I like that when you said it was shelter, but it wasn't home, right? A roof over your head is not the same thing as a house. And so again, the collective trauma that was experienced as a result of that incident, right? And then again, we expect people to bounce back. Hey, go to school, go to work. The water done dried out. You should be able to pick up the pieces, even though you don't have a piece of nothing left. The irony of that. Isn't that something? Yes.
So that's my wife.
Hey.
We did go to New Orleans to visit that family. And one of the things we noticed also was that they have houses on bricks, so the houses are built up to, for flooding. Well, they would have one house here, they'd skip a couple houses, and you could see the bricks, but there was no house. So you had that, and I think they call it the ninth ward, and they just had it. So you got to see, it started to hit home. Even though I wasn't there, I saw it on the news, but you still felt it for them, because it was one house here that they just started building up. They were telling us, like, yeah, we used to have this here, and now it's not there no more. And I'm like, just, just seeing them explain it, it's like you feel their trauma even though you weren't even there, but they still have that trauma. It's like, that was a strong, impact on their community.
Yeah, really impact on all of our communities, because it kind of made you look at things differently, right? Like, oh, they're just across the country. I too could be considered a refugee if the wrong thing happened at the right time, right? Yeah. And just sharing that, right? Can you imagine now you walking by the houses and this was a thriving community, and your partner stay down there, and your cousins over there, and your aunties and them over there, and now everybody's gone. And now you have the remnants of these bricks that are these constant reminders of what it was. Yeah. So not only is that trauma experienced in the moment, but it's re-traumatizing to people as well. Yeah. Yes.
I have a cousin in New Orleans. She's a street performer. And I went down to see her, and I drove by the ward, Ninth Ward, and all around there was like a ghost town. It was so sad and depressing, and I just couldn't believe it. And I went years after, and it was still just a ghost town. Everything's empty. The houses are just, it's crazy. I couldn't believe it. That they haven't torn down and redid anything. It's just the same, probably to this day.
A constant reminder,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
Of what was and what will never be again. Yeah. And so, I mean, like sharing these stories, I'm impacted, right? I mean, and we have different vantage points. Somebody family from down there who went to go visit, was working with somebody displaced and went to go see what it looks like. Yeah. And then you so eloquently articulated the definition of vicarious trauma, right? How you are impacted by an event that didn't directly affect you, but the fact that it happened and you thought about it and were impacted by it by knowing somebody has that residual effect on you. Yes, yes.
I have a statement, kind of statement question. In Chicago, it was, I believe it was something like eminent domain. And they tore down an area in where I was growing up where everybody was black, looked like me, and they tore down all the homes and they paid them to move, but my aunt was the last one to go. And so for some reason, when we were during my childhood, my brother always wanted to walk through these vacant lots. And I don't know. And I would say, why we got to go this way? Why don't we just go? Why are we walking through here? I didn't like it. And he always wanted to go through there, and I wonder what brings our mind, why do we always go back to revisit and it's painful? Why do we do that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, a lot of times, you can the way that our mind works, we can fill in the blanks. And so even though it's just some empty bricks there, I remember the house. I remember walking in the house, the second step squeaked. I remember the smell in the house, right? Closing the door. So those types of things come back to us. And the way that our memories are activated, it's not just in our mind, right? You can taste and experience sometimes. Have y'all ever tasted that before? So we are reactivated, right? So we think just because we see it that that's going to be the impact. But no, we experience memory throughout our entire body. And so I would imagine that it has something to do with being able to recreate just in a moment in our mind what it was and finding some level of solace in that. And even though you may not have seen it in that way, right, you are still going through it with them, right? So maybe they needed a little bit of support. Maybe it was to expose you to what it was. But I feel like it was probably to kind of have a positive memory, brought back up. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Mhm.
I don't know if I'm jumping ahead, but I have to ask the question.
Yes.
So you said that ACEs started right there on 3rd Street. That's where the term came from. And I'm a school teacher, and I asked the question because I honestly don't feel that I'm effective anymore. But I also realize that our students are experiencing collective trauma, and it's very difficult to teach children, students, high school students, who don't come to school, who have a lot going on, and our numbers say, oh, well, black students aren't, African-American students aren't passing, African-American students aren't there, but they're also not there. And even when they're there, they're still not there. Like they're in the school, but they're not in the classroom. And then when they're in the classroom, they're not paying attention. So you're there, but you're still not there. And so we see the impacts of whatever's going on collectively as a group. My question is, how do we help these young people? I mean, because honestly, that's my question. I'm like, I just don't know what to do. If I call home, it seems like the parents are not helpful. Or they're dealing with their own trauma, so they don't have time to deal with whatever trauma their child is going through, because they got their own stuff going on. And anyway, they're already in high school, so they should figure it out. They know they're supposed to do this. They know they're supposed to go to class. They know what they're supposed to do. So we kind of dealing with that, and it's like an ongoing thing. But each year, it gets worse and worse and worse. It's not getting any better, you know. So even like from last year to this year, huge difference. And I know COVID played a huge part. I think every student should have repeated that grade because they didn't learn anything for a whole year. And that effect, we're seeing the effects of that too, because the students just don't know. They really don't.
Well, let me talk about that a little bit. I don't know, did y'all read my slide deck before? Well, and you know, so I do have some of that a little bit later down the slide deck, so I'll talk about it more detailed then, but in response to your question, the shift needs to the focus needs to shift, right? Because we're like, we want to teach these kids, they should get it. That's like expecting somebody to run who hasn't even learned how to take a first step, right? We have to dial it back a little bit. And you know, the concept, when I said trauma-informed practices, that's really what I'm talking about. Because if you can recognize it, I'm sure other people, other teachers recognize it. They're disconnected, right? And then you said it, parents got their own complex traumas. Can you imagine that? Complex trauma on complex trauma on complex trauma, because now we're starting to get into some generational trauma as well. And so when we think about that as a collective experience, that even magnifies the whole issue. And so to expect one 16-year-old child to get it together when mama, daddy, grandmama and them, auntie and them ain't got it together is unrealistic, right? And so that's why I said we got to dial it back. And so in being trauma-informed in our practices, that's what would dictate that. So instead of maybe having an academic expectation in that moment, because I'm not saying that they can't, but are there counseling services available, not just to the kid, but to the family? Are they going out to the house? When we say meeting people where they are, it might be at their front door, right? And so that is kind of the direction when we think about trauma-informed practices on the education level. Because if I am still thinking about not eating, my mama got beat up last night, I haven't had no new clothes, I don't know how to do this, I don't have that. Coming into your classroom, that's all I'm thinking about. And us as adults, y'all know what I'm talking about. If you a mama in the house, no disrespect to the daddies, but if you a mama in the house, you got to think about childcare. What time I pick them up, if I'm late, it's going to be an extra cost. I got to get to work, cross this bridge, pay this bill, and this is today. Right? And so, but we have this unrealistic expectations of our kids to get it together. Hey, you 16, you don't have nothing to worry about. That may have been the case at some point in somebody's day, but 16-year-olds have a lot on their plate because they too went through the pandemic just like the rest of us. And while we were fully functioning adults with all of our faculties together, they missed years of socialization, they missed years of interacting. If you don't practice it, you don't use it, you lose it, right? But yet we throw them back into school. All right, get back to it. 10th grade, 11th grade, you should have did better, you should be ready, right? We haven't even reconciled our impact by the pandemic, right? People lost jobs, lost loved ones, people are still dealing with that, but yet we have these expectations of our kids to be able to snap out of it. Right? Again, collective trauma. This is not something that just you experience, right? This is all of our experience. And even though we may have been at different ages, that doesn't matter. The fact that the trauma existed is impactful enough. And the fact that we are so comfortable in dismissing the feelings and the experiences of kids. Right? I have two teenage daughters. The joys of 16 and 18. Right? But, you know, I can't be dismissive in interactions with them, right? Because who knows how it'll come back, right? Yeah. So I appreciate that question, and we can talk later. We can exchange notes, because I'm not saying that I know all the answers, and I'm sure you have a couple of solutions yourself. But for us to think that they can think about algebra, writing a paper, and all of these things when they haven't eaten, their mom just got beat up by this boyfriend. We haven't seen this parent. right? They're dealing with bullying. Social media is crazy, right? We dismiss it. Like I go on there and I like a couple of pictures, like thinking I'm doing something. I done swiped left and everything, right? This is actually their space to socialize, and it became even bigger space when the pandemic happened. So we can't dismiss that. And so just like we're talking about our collective traumas, they're also having those. And it's not just happening in the physical space, but now it's also transferring to the digital space here, right? And what does that look like? Right.
And also, they're dealing with someone on addiction that's dealing with addiction, which is also compounded on everything you just mentioned.
Right. This complex trauma is for real, right? When we think about this collective experience, don't just look at it from our watching war. War was on TV. I hated it. But it was on every channel, Fox, 5, 7. Just a different angle of when a bomb went off, right? That was traumatizing. And so, again, another collective experience. Yeah. But we can talk. What's your name?
Musetta.
Musetta?
Musetta. I work right up at Burton High School. And I'm really working, that's why I'm at all these events, because I need to learn how to better serve the students. Because we do have counselors, but even though you have counselors, it's just so much, we don't have enough staff. There's not enough, or not enough trained people. Not enough people, not enough trained people, and I just try to meet them where they at. I need you to do a little something. I mean, I have to say, I can pass you because you did something, but when I look on my paper, there's nothing there. If I have to be challenged by this, you haven't been to class. When you're in class, you haven't done anything. And it's like, you have something else on your plate that you need to take care of first before we can even talk about school. Because you're there, like I said, there.
But they're not
your
there.
mind is not there.
Yeah.
Your physical body may be here, but mentally, you are elsewhere. And then drugs, like Gloria said, drugs impact that. You know, everybody's smoking. I don't know if they drink it, but they almost, a lot of them smoke. They, 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, and then when that doesn't work, then they probably go to something else.
Right.
Sir.
Yeah. Right. And so this collective trauma also breeds these other adverse responses, right? And we deal with those adverse responses in our communities, right? We've seen the people who are on drugs, on alcohol, right? We've seen the people who may have started other types of addictions, right? We've seen those, right? Yeah. And so the objective is for our youth not to go in that direction as well. Yeah. Yes.
I had a statement for you also to help out that there is, even before the pandemic, there was this big thing in our community where boys don't cry. And so Jalen Rose, who's a retired, I guess he just got his, he was on the Tamron Hall show, I think episode 166, if you refer back to that, you get a lot of information about how males accept information and how boys have been taught to repress a lot of things. Secondly, there's a large percentage of African American, especially males and Mediterraneans, that are dyslexic. So dyslexia is a gift, but we don't know it. We were taught it was a disease. Dyslexic will not do anything unless they can see that they'll finish. So you say, oh, why they never even try? Because if they think I'm not gonna pass it, then they'll just shut down. Mm-hmm. So if they know that their brain, they don't see backwards either. So I have males in my family, I have sons. And so I had to deal with hearing, I'm a failure, I can't read, I don't understand it. But if you say, well, shut up, don't cry, don't say that, instead of allowing them to have that space to really be vulnerable and to say it's okay for you to cry as a male and as a boy child. So there's a lot of things like that that happened even before the pandemic that's happening now, that's creating this whole stigma that 20 males enter school and only 2 graduate. Mm-hmm. And so we're continuing to see that path. So we need more black educators, and that's why I'm in the Black Cohorts to go back to teach at 60-something years old, because it's needed. And grandmas do real good Because we don't have a whole lot what mama dealt with,
Right.
you know, so grandma and a child is the best bond you can find. So yeah, that's, so everybody in here, this room should be packed wall to wall. It should not even be room, standing room in here because our community has experienced so much trauma. We should be in those jails and in these schools volunteering, showing up for the community to help those mamas that's busy.
Well, I just want to say thank you for sharing that. And to your point, or to add to your eloquently stated point, just in regards to the males being taught not to cry, I thought that was like, that just impacted me, right? Anybody have a man in their life, some way, fashion, or form? And are you familiar with that being taught without being spoken? Yeah. Another example of how we pass down these collective traumas, right? You know, how it's not okay to emote, right? But we want you, when we ask you what's going on with you, we expect you to be able to tell us. But if it's emotional, then you should package that up and not express it in that way, right? And so when we think about these responses to things, because that's actually a response, what was the triggering force or things that set that into motion, right? Again, another collective trauma, right? Because it's about being protected. It's about not being weak, right? It's about being able to stand your ground. It's about being a man when historically there have been situations where you could not even be a man. Right? And so now we flash forward to this space now, and we have this expectation of this grandiosity in being a man or exerting these types of behaviors and what is not permitted and what is permitted. And again, based in these collective traumas, because again, it's not okay to be a weak man out here. It's not. It's not okay to cry and show your emotions. Has anybody ever heard, that's what girls do? Stop acting like a girl. Right. Well, I mean, it's good over here on the girls' side. Come on over, right? Don't knock it, right? But that has how we've been taught. And again, when we think about these collective traumas, a lot of times we don't even see the trauma. We just see the responses. And that becomes the norm. Think about that. That becomes the norm. That behavior is normal, more normalized. And when we see a boy crying, oftentimes we dismiss his feelings. But we expect him to be able to show up confident, articulate what's going on with him. But when he shows his feelings, we throw them away and say, that is inappropriate for you. A lot of times that's based on our own experience, right? Of what we have been taught as what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. Yes.
Or we tell them to suppress it. Why are you so emotional? Calm down, be quiet, don't be so loud. When loud could be passionate. They have to express it. Shh, not now, not now.
Not here, not in this circumstance, right? But package that up and take that back to the hood where you came from, where it's more acceptable, but not in these spaces here. And kind of to your point, instructor back there, you know, that's what they're doing. They're taking these feelings and packaging them up, and then they're just holding it. Just holding it. Can't show it here, can't show it there, right? I might be able to get away with it on social media, but if I do too much, I might get banned and kicked off of stuff or arrested or all the things, right? Because that symptom as a response to my collective trauma is deemed acceptable. Yeah. Well, we got some things to do, huh? We got to roll it back. Yeah, thinking about that, yes.
So when you say roll it back, my son asked me the question the other day. He's a part of this group, and he asked me, Dad, what does being a man mean? And I had to think about that, because I'd never been asked that question. And I believe, and I told him, I said, basically, I said, a man is being a jack of all trades. A man should be able to cry. A man should have his emotions, but he should also be hard. He should be stern, but he should be soft. So to me, that was what a man, that's what I described to him as a man should be, because he should be able to do all the above.
Right.
You know, and then nobody looked down upon him. You know, I used to say, oh man, I like soft legs rather, you know, hard legs, but you know, they should be medium legs.
Medium legs, bring back the mediums. Right.
But I mean, you know, him asking me that question, and then when the young lady brought up men and all that, I mean, you know, that society is what taught men, like, oh, we gotta be hard. You know, we gotta lift weights, we gotta play sports, we gotta play this, play that. You can't be soft, don't be soft. And I'm like, being emotional is not soft. It's just showing that you have empathy, you have feelings. You're being a human. And part of human is man, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Threw something in there, a little human in there. I got you. I got you. No, but I mean, thank you for that, right? Because it is, right? We are often rooted in our own collective trauma that we can't even step outside of it, right? Can't see the forest for the trees kind of thing, right? And so instead of stopping it, we continue to repeat it. Yeah. The conversations were so enriching. This is a great group. I want to come back and talk to y'all. I got to slide 4 out of 25 talking with y'all, right? No, but this is the purpose of the conversation, right? This is engaging. This is how learning really transfers, right? Because I can walk around holding this, or you can walk around holding whatever you know, but if we don't share it, we don't know. And so that's why I really appreciated your question back there, because, you know, I'm sure you know what's going on in the high schools, but maybe everybody else may not know. And so to bring some awareness about the level of trauma that we're seeing showing up in our students in high school is important. Yeah.
Is that your question?
I do have, we can open it up for questions. Is there a question? Yes.
Elementary school too.
I'm just thinking, you know, it seems like it's so much harder nowadays to control different things, especially with children, you know, growing up. I remember when, during my time, growing up, it seemed like a parent could control the children, boys and girls, much easier than now today. And so, why is it so difficult now?
Ooh, I'm like, oh Lord, how much time do we have? But
So
you
we're
know,
going back 1930, so the perspective, the
yeah.
whole climate is
Yeah.
different.
Well, I mean, the whole cross-cultural perspective of parenting, depending upon your generation, it can be very different, right? And it's interesting, the irony. We have so many things at our disposal. Life is so much easier, convenient, right? Meetings via Zoom, everything's on your cell phone, right? Google knows everything, right? AI can write a paper for you, right? But yet, bringing it back to the basics, why do we then have those level of challenges with our kids when before we had all those technologies? That wasn't the challenge. That wasn't an issue. Well, I'll give you a little perspective on where I see that possibly coming from. In our attempts to respond to our own collective traumas growing up, right? We often try to make it better for the next generation. Anybody guilty of that? Oh, my baby gonna have them shoes. Oh no, my baby gonna have some new clothes on that first day of school, right? And so we are very focused on this intentionality of lightening the load for our kids, as to be expected, right? But in lightening the load, are we truly balancing the shift that has taken place? A lot of times when we had responsibilities, chores, there was accountability in the neighborhood, right? You couldn't just run all rampant, talk to people crazy, do all those types of things because 5 people down the block gonna tell your mom. Nowadays, do we even know our neighbors?
Well, you know, when we were growing up at my age, we would listen and pay attention to our parents. And, you know, that made things much easier to deal with. Even with the parent, they could handle their kids much better than today, seemingly, to me. I don't know why. Explain it.
Well, no, and I appreciate the back and forth. This is how you get better, right? Yeah. I mean, you know, just kind of back to my point, like, you know, the parenting dynamic has definitely shifted. And if mom is also dealing with her levels of complex trauma and dad is dealing with his level of complex trauma, the child is still learning from them, but that's what they're learning from them. All right.
I'd like to say
10 more minutes? Okay.
there's
Okay.
a real simpler answer, Mama. The government is in our community and in our homes and controlling. Right now, Americans are being kidnapped, being paid to be kidnapped and not brought back home. And then we aren't safe now anymore as Americans. This stuff is real. So a lot has just changed. That from your day, yes, we lived in the days of milk and honey, but right now, we're getting ready to see radical things happen that have never happened in this country and outside of this country. And we got to brace and hold on. It's real. It's survival now.
And so even just thinking about collective trauma, going back to that, like if that is the next frontier in our American experience, what can we expect in regards to that? Yes.
But what my mama said, you know, a lot of what's happening is that, like you first said, is that we parent different. But when you were growing up, mama still took care of their child, but when you brought crack cocaine into the picture, that took away mamas. And then grandparents also had to start taking care of kids, and grandparents started getting older and older. And even in your day, women got married, and at 14, 15, they did have children, but they were also responsible and took care of the children. But now when you have a child 14, 15, 16, you're not taking care of your child, somebody else always is. Maybe it's a family member, or maybe you go into the foster care system, and then anybody is raising your child, and then, like we're talking about collective trauma, that's collective trauma, because you was with your mom, but maybe she wasn't the best mom, but she was still your mom.
Yeah.
She was yours, and now you've been displaced from her, dropped into a whole new spot with a whole new group of people that you don't know, and you're expected to be okay with that. And then when you do the wrong thing, they don't want you anymore, and they put you somewhere else, and you go back, and then you do this thing all again. And we have a lot of students who are in foster care. We have a lot of students who don't have parents. And a long time ago, we did this, I think it was called Be the Change or something, Make a Change. But there was this activity we did. And the activity was we were crossing the line, they would say a question, and if it applied to you, you would go to the other side and cross the line and just kind of see the similarities that you have with a bunch of other people that you don't even know or are maybe not associated with. And one of the questions was, I have never been a child. And then a lot of people walked across, and I'm just like, what do you mean you've never been a child? Like that concept of not being a child just blew my mind. And so I asked a couple of people that afterwards who crossed the line and said they had never been a child, and they said, my mom had so many kids, I always had to take care of the siblings because I was the oldest, and I had to cook, and I had to take care of this baby, and I had to babysit, and I had to drop them off for school. I had never had a childhood. And so when I talked to some of my students, they said, well, I'm sorry, Ms. Jones, you know, I'm just dealing with a lot of stuff, but when I get to school, I don't have to do nothing. Like, I'm a child here. Like, I don't have a responsibility, so that's why I don't go to class, because this is the only time that I have an opportunity to be a kid and not have a responsibility to
Think about all that stuff, yeah.
And do anything else.
Yeah.
It's just me, and I can do whatever I want. And I'm choosing not to go to class because I get freedom right now.
Right.
Like, this is the only freedom that I have.
I'm familiar with that experiment because that's actually something that's been replicated a couple of different times. And it is very telling. Got you. It is very telling. But what I do like is again, when we think about these collective traumas, right, because we're talking about these experiences that are shared by more than just one person, right? You are seeing this show up in schools, and I'm saying, she even said elementary schools, right? And so to know that there are people, young people, who are experiencing these very, traumatic situations across the board.
And they're on the floor screaming and kicking the wall and just,
Yeah.
and they're 7 years old.
Because that is the way that it shows up. I just want to go through a couple more slides here when we think about some more examples of what collective trauma looks like. And kind of to your point also when you said like this is a new day and age, right? We are going into unexplored territory here. So please brace yourself, right? Some of the things that we are seeing, not just because of the pandemic, right? We have ACEs. We already know what ACEs is, right? We know about limitations to health care and access. We know that people who don't get health care early on often have health issues later in life. We know that when we think about certain specific populations in our community, they're more impacted. A lot of times we want to throw away our people who've gone to jail or prison, right? They're coming back home. 95% of them are coming back home, right? But yet we turn our backs to them. And just think, if we turn our backs to them, what is the greater society looking like for them? And so again, a collective experience. We've often been taught those are bad people, stay away from them. No, those are our people. We need to instill better skill sets in them, right? But again, when we think about all these small pockets of this collective trauma, it really starts to add up. So when we talk about complex trauma, you may know this person who went to prison, came back, couldn't get a job. They got kids to take care of. Now they on child support, can't get a job, right? Now they're reverting back to illegal activities because they can't get employment, right? And now they're getting picked up and thrown away back into our system. And what happens to the kid? And what happens to the community when you have parents absent from raising your children, right? Again, this level of collective trauma. Now, I'm not here to depress you because y'all just ate a good meal. Turkey wings, I believe, right? That's not what the intention is. The intention is to bring our awareness to it, right? And so to continue to have these conversations about how do we address trauma? How do we identify it, right? And just kind of how do we shift our thinking so they should get it together? Right? She's talking about elementary kids on the floor flailing all over the place, right? Because they're probably out of sense and out of touch with themselves because of the traumatic experiences that they've been exposed to. Right? We got some work to do, but y'all the workers. Engaged, talking, asking questions, informing me and the crowd, right? This is how we transcend the traumatic experiences that people have experienced. This is how we get through the collective trauma to the other side. This is how we reset those generational curses, right? And the ways that we were taught previously, not in parenting, right? But in how we respond and support and have the expectations of our children, right? Trauma, complex trauma, like I said, like we see very frequently, is not just a one-offer. So the solution is not going to just be a one-offer. It's going to be continuous conversations and actual actions behind it. So I think we're about that time. Okay, I don't have a watch. I stopped looking at my watch, talking to y'all. This is a good conversation. Okay, I got 3 more slides. You see how you just keep going and keep trying? All right, so I want to talk about some other collective traumas that we may experience. Right, we've seen people who had them good jobs, them government jobs, get laid off, right? So that is a concern now for many other people as well, right? And thinking about a collective trauma, well, mass unemployment is a collective trauma. You may not know, because you may only know about like the Detroit Now, but when you take these businesses that are thriving and helping to create a middle class, and you take them out, what is left? Well, with the remnants of a community that was once thriving, they're left with the bricks on the ground.
It's like Baltimore.
Yeah, we could start naming all the cities. There we go. Oh my goodness, right? I mean, you could run it up. And so to know that that is also a collective trauma that people have experienced as well. All right, let me see here. So some impacts of collective trauma, and this is probably to be expected as the conversation unfolds, right? Some emotional responses may be fear, sadness, hopelessness, tearfulness. Some other challenges to your point or your experiences, difficulty concentrating and making decisions, right? Behavioral changes include withdrawing, being irritable, absenteeism, or drug use. Like she read the slide, right? Yeah. People may display trauma responses, may have difficulty concentrating. Like I said, the emotional numbness. I think that was something that you kind of spoke to, like they just don't feel. Doesn't work. It's not activated in the same ways because it's been overactivated. Yeah. All right, let me see here. So looking at some trauma-informed practices here when we're thinking about how to be responsive to ourselves, our people, our communities, and even clients who may have experienced some level of trauma. Starting with safety. And I'm not talking about the physical safety because you said the body is in class, but the mind is not here, right? I'm talking about the psychological safety that exists. The psychological safety to be yourself, to speak, to voice, to share, right? Psychological safety is the belief that one can speak up, ask questions, make mistakes without fear of embarrassment, punishment, or marginalization. Right. Just think if you could come to class and I could say, you know what, I had a horrible night last night. Can I just sit here? I'm gonna take it in as I take it in. Can I just be, right? How many 15-year-olds even have the insight to say that? I'm just gonna cut class today, right? So yeah, we are seeing that here. Some tools to help to mitigate that. And again, this is not a solution, but this is solution-based information here. Predictability in the classes, the conversations, the meetings. People like predictability, don't y'all? We like that, right? Once you know what to expect, you kind of start to expect it all the time. Right, structure. But it could even be just coming in and saying, hey, 5 minutes, everybody just take a breath and pause. And we're gonna do that every day. And I know the class is only 55 minutes, but what use is the other 50 if I can't get you to focus? And if I could use those first 5 to get you to focus so that this other 50 makes sense, then why not take that opportunity? Normalize help seeking, right? When you ask for help, especially when we think about the different genders, right? Certain people, certain groups help, you can ask, but other times you get this negative response as a result of it. And so what does that make you do? Not exactly. You don't want to ask for help. I'm going to be embarrassed, shamed because I didn't know the answer. I'm not even going to ask the question. Yeah. And another thing we often do is sarcasm, right? And it's our attempt to kind of maybe make light of the situation, or sometimes we're dismissive of people. But if I'm asking you for help, I don't need you to make a joke or a mockery out of the situation. Yeah. I get that enough from my peers. Some other principles here: trustworthiness and transparency. Be clear about expectations. Be clear, right? And this is not just in the classroom, this is in your social interactions, this is engaging with people. You know my boundaries, I know yours, right? We have an understanding of what this will be. If you're thinking about working with a client, they may also fall into that same expectation, and being honest about yourself. A lot of times we make it, you know how we make it, right? You finally got that job that puts you over here, and then we forget about all of the stuff. But I like you because of all the stuff, right? So don't forget about that. Yeah.
Sometimes it, you know, creating boundaries and sticking with the boundaries, that process is very, it's the process. It can be long and very emotional, and usually met with great resistance and rejection. And sometimes you lose them there.
Yeah. This is true. This is the possibilities. But what I will say is, it's that consistency, right? Anybody had that teacher from the 3rd, 5th, 4th grade, Miss such and such, she didn't play that. Right. But when I needed something to eat, she had me, right? I couldn't act a fool in such and such's class because she didn't play that. But when I needed something, she was there. And so that's where we have to shift that. I'm not trying to make friends with you right? Because we have a greater goal and objective when we think about parenting, when we think about raising kids or teaching kids, right? Yeah, and so when I say boundaries, this is not like a fixed fort against anybody, right? But this is a clear expectations of who I am. I'm gonna show up the same every time. And so this is what the expectation is. And so kind of to your point, ma'am, when you were asking about, when we were talking about like modeling behavior, now we're starting to model what the expectations are. Do you see how easy it is to see it versus to say it, right? That do as I say, not as I do, right? Because they see everything. Everything is on the computer. They seen it before you saw it, and you did it. Think about that, right? Yeah, so that's where those boundaries come into play. Just a couple more. Okay. All right, peer support. Encourage the development of an outside support system. Yeah. Well, our kids are often in sports and all of those types of things, and that is great, especially when we think about the years that they've lost in socializing. They got some times to make up for, right? They need to learn, right? We practice how to interact with people. They have to practice that. Involvement in pro-social sports, the inclusion of a positive community support to exist once the therapeutic relationship ends. And so this is if somebody's in therapy, right? I used to be a probation officer. I only work with my clients, ideally, for up to 3 years at a time. But in that time frame, my objective was to connect you back to your community, because I'm not here for the long time, right? I need you to be connected to people who will support you positively, right? When we talk about grandparents, right? Having somebody who can model those types of relationships, that's how we are responsive to this collective trauma here. When we think about collaboration and mutuality in the classroom and in the learning space, right? I know what the board and the school district says and all the STAR testings and all the things, right? I understand that you have clear measures that you have to meet, but also being open to pulling in a student's perspective of what's important in the lesson, right? Involve students in the creation of classroom norms, right? So maybe the norm is everybody, have y'all seen the little kids? Everybody walks in, gives a high five. Have y'all seen the people where kids come in and they have like a happy face, a smiley face, or just kind of non-emotional face, right? They're able to emote without even emoting. Last one here. So empowerment, voice, and choice. Provide opportunities for self-expression in multiple modalities. Multiple modalities, right? It's not just one way to be you. So we can't expect our children to have to conform in that way. Sometimes they need to jump. Sometimes they need to run. Have y'all seen kids, all they do is run back and forth? I wish this right knee would allow me to run back and forth like that, right? Let them be, right? Allow, because sit down, be still. Right. Wow, that's so hard at 6 and 7. It's hard at 16 to 17, right? Allow them to be in whatever is their natural state of being. Yeah.
Wow, that's really, I'm so glad you said that. It reinforces things for me as a grandmother, dealing with some of the negativities of what these young kids have to go through. And then to your point, Lady G, when you said, it's easy for us as grandparents to bond with that child. It is and it isn't, but
I didn't say it was easy. I said it is the perfect bond.
It's the perfect
because
bond.
Because the child knows that a grandmother can't chase him 3 blocks down. They know, so they're not, but that still works. It has its place because the child learns to listen without necessarily have to, I gotta whoop you in order for you to listen.
Well, I digress, but I will say that's a relationship that has to build.
Yeah.
They do have a reverence, but they will challenge you, and that's where that boundary that you spoke about come the same way all the time, and that trust will build and form, and then maybe they will act the way they should, or we desire them to, but if they want to run, let them run.
Yeah.
Take them to a place.
Take them
so
to a park where it's safe. Right. Brent. All right, so in conclusion, I just want to say thank you all for this wonderful conversation. I hope you are leaving enriched and empowered and informed, because I am. You all are great educators. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Come on through with the standing ovation. Dr. Moore, they showing you some love today. Thank you. They asking for a part two. Let me see what we can do.